Not only has the workforce changed overall with going through COVID and all the trauma that we've all been through with that, but it's also presented lots of challenges. We can't move things forward if we don't have trust in any relationship, whether it's a marriage or a friendship or a workplace relationship. What I do think AI can help us with is to be able to jumpstart or help us be more efficient to where we as humans can live into the human experience more and in better ways.
Before we jump into this episode, I'd love to invite you to be a part of the community where you can listen to more content to help you be a smarter, stronger, and better equipped, successful leader. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button. I would love and appreciate your support. It's amazing to me to watch the community grow and read all of your comments each and every week. I can't wait to go on the journey with you. Thank you so much, and it means the world to me. On today's episode, I'm joined by Tate. Holly is the Chief Marketing Officer at Leadr, a digital workspace that builds effective leadership and healthy teams. Prior to working at Leadr, she spent 9 years at Vanderbloemen, where she helped build teams in their executive search firm. In 2020, Holly left as a role of Vice President of Business Development Marketing to launch the Ready Network. She then also joined Leadr. She is the Chief Marketing Officer at Leadr again, and she is a contributor to the Forbes Communication Council, where she's contributed over 30 plus articles on communication and leadership. Holly, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. I feel like I should have known you for years, but this is our first time ever interacting. It's probably because we have so many close friends or a mutual mindset. But man, I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Well, I'm so glad that you asked me to be here. I am honored to be a part of the conversation today and just really appreciate what you're doing through Impact Driven Leader and helping leaders grow and develop. That's what I'm all about. So I'm excited.
So in the open, you were asking like, who's the audience? And I went through that. And then ultimately at the end, I said, you. And so I'd kind of like to kick off and as we discuss that is to share kind of your experience, why I believe that, I'm best served to serve people like you, but also that you can relate so much to this, I would say, leadership challenge, conundrum, crisis that we're in today.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Where do we start, Tyler? So many different pieces there. I think for me, one of the realizations that I had when I left Vanderbloemen, where I was for, like, as you said, 9 years, and really it was most of my 20s. I mean, I think I was 22 when I started that role and really, spent all of my 20s there. And so when I left to start my own company and then eventually joined Leadr, I had a realization pretty early on that I'm not the young one anymore. It was, I kind of had this ego when I was helping teams build their teams through our work at Vanderbloemen doing executive search. It was like, oh, let me tell you how to lead millennials. Let me tell you how to do this. And then when I realized, oh, I'm now leading Generation Z. And even though there's only, depending on the age gap, sometimes a 10-year or maybe even less age gap there, their expectations of their workforce are so different. And so that was kind of a personal journey that started for me about 3 years ago of going, oh goodness, not only has the workforce changed overall with going through COVID and all the trauma that we've all been through with that, and some really great things that came out of it, like remote working and hybrid teams, really making great people more accessible to companies from around the country. But it's also presented lots of challenges, like employees demanding things that employers aren't quite used to and don't know how to quite handle. And so I'm also in that, kind of elder millennial, or I guess mid-millennial to elder millennial, which means that, we're leading up to, well, we're in executive roles like myself. I'm, a younger person in an executive role, which is unique because there just aren't as many Gen Xers. I mean, just statistically, there are not as many Gen Xers as there are millennials and boomers. And so that age gap is really interesting. How do you lead up well? How do you lead down well? How do you find the confidence to lead every day when you're figuring it out for the first time? So lots of different complexities there that I think is why, impact-driven leader is so important. But hopefully people can relate to my story because, at the end of the day, we're all just trying to figure it out.
You mentioned they're trying to lead either older or younger. That you're like, no, I'm still one of you. But what was the biggest challenge of like? Was it trust? Was it connection? Was it like I know the way, follow me? Take me through that. Help me understand a little bit those challenges that you saw that and how you worked through them.
Yeah. So for me personally, it was when I joined Leadr, which we're, as you said, we're a software platform. And so I was a one-woman marketing team. And because we were probably less than 30 employees at the time. And this was about 3.5 years ago. And one of my coworkers came to me and said, "Hey, Holly, I know you're overloaded. You've got a lot on your plate. I have a friend whose son is in college and is looking for an internship. And so I thought of you." And I was like, "Yes, please. That sounds great." So I interviewed him and I could tell he was really, really sharp. And so hired him. And in our first one-on-one, I presented a project. And I was, so proud of myself for coming with a very organized plan to be able to delegate to him. And it was around social media. So it was super simple. It was like, here's the Canva login. Here's some quotes. Posting on Instagram should be on the top of my list, but it's on the bottom of my list right now. Would love for your help. Take these quotes, put them in Canva. Let's post them on Instagram. And then about a week later in our next one-on-one, I'm like, "Hey, I haven't heard much, about this project. How's it going? How can I help?" And he's like, "Yeah, about that. I just didn't really agree with what, the project was. I didn't think it was right, like the right way. And so, here's what I think we should do instead." And it was just like completely different direction. And that was just the beginning of several conversations where I'm going, wow, like I would have never imagined at 19 years old to go to my boss and say, "No, I'm just not going to do that." And so it kind of put me on this journey of going, okay, I always try to look in the mirror first. I learned that in my 20s of rather than blaming on other people, looking in the mirror and going, okay, what is it about my leadership that's not working here? And so I went to Google and found this really awesome chart. It's a company actually out of, I think they're out of Australia. And they do a lot of work around multi-generational perspectives in the workplace. And this graph, it was the light bulb moment for me. And what it showed was that Generation X and millennials they view authority and the workplace, or I should say leadership styles, a lot more similarly. And it's Generation Z, which right now is about 27, like at the time that we're recording this, is about 27 and below in age. That is where it drastically changes their view of their relationship with authority. And so it just, I realized, rather than being directive and more authoritarian or flat leader, but clear leader structure, I realized that I very quickly needed to learn how to be more collaborative, how to ask more questions on the front end if I really wanted the best work out of those that were younger than me on the team. So that's kind of how it started for me, and has been, a 3-year journey of continuing to learn how to work best, specifically with Generation Z, but also the other generations that are on our team as well.
I think you gave a snapshot, a picture, an experience that whether people can relate to or not, they've probably sensed that there's this pushback, maybe not so bold as what this individual did, but that harkens, that makes me think of like, all right, you talked about, I need to look at this different. I need to be more collaborative. And that really, it looks to me, instead of, hey, do as you're told, come on, buddy, you actually went to, all right, I need to develop a connection. I need to make sure that we trust each other so we can have this conversation. Is that kind of how you felt about it? Maybe now looking back after years later, or, tell me a little bit deeper the connection point to that.
Well, I think at the time, full transparency, I was just trying to figure out how do we get work done. So it was like, okay, I could really use his help. He's not a bad person. I think he's really sharp and can add a lot of value. So how do I, it was like, how do I build trust so that we can actually move this forward and not have to have these conversations of like back and forth all the time. So I think selfishly at the time, that was my motivating factor. But absolutely, what you're saying is true, that we can't move things forward if we don't have trust in any relationship, whether it's, a marriage or a friendship or a workplace relationship. And so it was really me trying to go, okay, yeah, how do we work together well? Which I don't know if, you're a fan of Patrick Lencioni, but he talks about in 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, trust is the foundation. Like you cannot do anything else until you have that trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how did you do it? Like, what did you do to get him to trust you? Say, no, this is what we want to do.
Yeah. Well, I think so. What I wish I had done at the beginning, which I did a bit later on, was really lead with the problem that I was trying to solve. So what I wish that I had done was say, hey, I'm so glad you're on the team. Can't wait for your help. The problem that I'm trying to solve is I've got a lot on my plate. Clearly, social media is an important part of marketing. So I would love to hear your ideas for how we can engage our audience on social media to help people learn more about Leadr. But instead, I jumped straight to the tactical and kind of wrote his plan for him. Yeah. And a realization that I had was, this generation specifically, even though I'm only, I was only 32 at the time of the story that I'm sharing, and he was 19. So like, we're only talking about, I don't know, what is that, 13 years? Yeah. Not many years. But I remember a time of like, dial up internet and going to, I think it was like Staples or Office Depot, and my dad would get the free AOL dial-up CD, and like that was our internet, or like my mom yelling at me to get off the phone so that she could use the internet. They don't remember that. Like they have had access to all of the information at their fingertips from, in their minds, day one. They can go to YouTube to learn how to do anything. So they're no longer looking at their boss or, their leader as an information carrier, because they can find that on their phone. And so that to me was a huge learning moment of start with the problem that I want solved, let them come to me with ideas. And then what they're looking to me for is coaching and guiding. That's what they can't get online. They can't get a coach or a guide. I mean, of course you can hire a coach or a guide, but what I mean is, they can't get that human interaction as far as trying out ideas and wrestling through things by watching a YouTube video. But they can get that with you as their leader and their boss in the workplace. So that was a big light bulb moment for me. And I tried to, from that first interaction, I wasn't perfect at it at all. But after that, I would try to go to him with the problem I was trying to solve, rather than asking him to just execute on the solution that I thought was best.
So, when we talk about this culture of trust, and especially that was a one person, okay, there's a lot of interaction, and he was in your office maybe now, or, when you recently, were in a bigger team. What were you doing there to, you could have that collaborativeness with, 1-2 people easily? How did you grow that? Or what are you guys prescribing to grow that trust and connection and that kind of problem solving nature in organizations?
I mean, I think the number one thing all of us can do is have effective one-on-one meetings, whether you want to call it one-on-one check-ins or meetings. But this is the most critical and free. All it takes is our time as a leader. It's not like this costs a huge investment financially or even energy-wise. But what I mean by a one-on-one is an intentional time on your calendar, you and your direct reports. I highly recommend on a weekly basis. Some people say, bi-weekly or once a month. I just think the world moves way too fast, especially when we're talking about the next generation. They can order Uber Eats or something on Amazon to be delivered to their doorstep in 2 hours. Why would they want to wait a whole week or 2 weeks? To meet with you. So a one-on-one is where we are focusing on 3 things. So first is care, making sure that person knows that you care for them. And it can be a simple question like, how are you really doing? Or, hey, you told me about your, family reunion you were going to last week. How did it go? I can't wait to hear about it. But that care component And for me, I need that accountability to just slow down because I come into all my meetings with lots of energy because I'm in like 15 million a day. So to start with that care question forces me as the leader to just pause and slow down, really connect with that person on a relational level. And then trying to touch on development in some way. And this doesn't always mean a promotion, but really showing that person that their development as a leader or in their role matters to you. And so asking them, about their best next step. Where do they want to be a year from now? How can you help them get there? What obstacles are they facing that you can help eliminate? And then that third component is performance. And so I found that when we're focused on care and development, performance tends to take care of itself because you've built that trust to where they're coming to you naturally throughout the week when issues arise. I find when that's not there, that's when they withhold information. They're scared to talk to you about performance because they don't want to feel like they've messed up or they're getting in trouble. But when you can foster a weekly space on both of your calendars, whether it's on Zoom or in person, I do feel pretty strongly about it being a video interaction. That is how we can all build trust with our teams to help move things forward.
Well, I mean, the great piece that you mentioned there in the very end is like, it doesn't have to be in person, but you have to be intentional about it. Yeah. And I think that's what's most important. Those that have maybe had diverse workplaces as far as where your location of work over the last 5-6 years have maybe experienced that sooner than others. And it's why they maybe embraced a hybrid workforce. But one of the challenges that I see, and you mentioned it a little bit, we're in the age of digital transformation. Right. And there's AI and there's all these new things coming at us where a lot of leaders, like you mentioned the AOL, like I remember those days in dial-up. Yeah, I won't go there. But that's so different than today, people that have it at their fingertips, ChatGPT, to all of it. How do we extend trust? How do we work through those things in your eyes and or that you're experiencing right now yourself in your role?
I mean, I think it makes it that much more important to have face-to-face interaction. So if you are a remote team, like here's a great example. So we have our executive team is me and 4 other men. So there's 5 of us. And I am several weeks away from my first child. And so I saw on the calendar, it was like, hey team, I saw that we have an on-site coming up, the second week of March. Unfortunately I can't travel, so we'll have to do it on Zoom. And all of them were like, no, we'll come to you. And I was just blown away I was so grateful, not only because that's so cool that 4 guys would be willing to come to me, the pregnant lady, a fellow executive team member of theirs, but also it's because in-person connection is so important. So for our team to be together is that important that they would take a day, when I usually go to them, because I'm remote, two out of the 5 of us are remote, 3 are in person together, and then the other 2 of us are remote. And so we meet weekly, and it's hybrid. Me and CJ are on Zoom, and then the other 3 are in person. But it's so important to us that we're at least in person on a quarterly basis together because we're a team, and you can't replace that in-person connection, building trust and rapport, but also just productivity that comes with being in person. And so I think that's a great little example of, our team holding that so highly, even in the midst of a world where we could all FaceTime together, we could all Zoom together. Like that's an option, but we know that to move our company initiatives forward, we need to be in person at least every quarter. And so whether that's, I think, if we're remote teams, we should budget for that. I think it should be a part of our budget is flying teams in or delegating that down to team leaders to have a budget to do what they need to in order to bring people together in person every once in a while. And it just can't replace technology. I'm like the biggest fan of remote working ever, but I still think we've got to budget time and finances to bring the team together in person as well.
Thank you for sharing that because it's pretty dynamic, what you just mentioned. And I feel like there's people listening in, there's probably one of 2 camps. There are women that are like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. That would like just make me melt and break my heart that someone I worked with would care that much and acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. I just want to put it there because I love the fact you share that because it shows what your organization values. And I
Yes.
don't think many organizations stop and reflect on that enough. But then there's also maybe somebody listening in that's like, that sounds great, but how do I convince others that that's what's most important that we need to do? Because
Yes.
I would love to be there with you, Holly. Like, sure, great. Can I help you set up the nursery? I get it. But yet there's others like, I got to work with Bob over here. And he's a codgy old baby boomer who's like, no, she doesn't need to be here or whatever else. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that may be their heart. They may be a grandfather. Like they get it, but they're like, oh no, you can't make it this time. We'll just catch you up, right? I can play the stories out and play the stories out. I think you get it. And that's the reality.
Tyler, I'm so glad you asked that because I am overwhelmed. I told my executive team this morning when we were talking about it, like I'm overwhelmed with gratitude that they would do that. And I also do not take for granted the fact that I'm on a team and, specifically our CEO who just had his first, like literally 2 weeks ago. There's lots of babies happening at Leadr right now. But yeah, that I get to work along someone who's at the helm that leads with the human in mind. That we were talking about that as a team this morning. Like we have to remember that every employee is a human and has crap that they're dealing with and has obstacles that they're facing outside of work. And I know that that's not the norm, which is literally our mission at Leadr. That's why we exist, is because there need to be more leaders. Like we need better leaders in the world. No one can argue with that. And so I guess I would say, and this is where I'm really proud of Generation Z. They're not going to put up with it. So like, I think millennials, we've put up with it because I know for myself, I'm still like, we're making progress, but I don't want to be the one that's like disrupting and, it's not their fault. They've just never been modeled good leadership. I have to help show them over time. But Generation Z is like, you're not going to value me as a person and you're not going to give me great benefits or pay me what I deserve. Like I can start a business on Instagram or go be part of the gig economy and make $50,000 a year on DoorDash. Like why in the world would I spend 60 hours a week working for you for $35,000? You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think when I talk to leaders about this, where they're that curmudgeon-y baby boomer that you just described, my challenge to that, I had a leader come up to me one day after a talk I was giving, and he said, I hear you, but like, I'm exhausted. And I just don't want to put on the work. Like, what's the alternative? And I said, you're not going to be able to retain younger team members and your organization will die. Like that's the alternative because they're not going to put up with it like millennials and Gen Xers have. So I guess your question was my encouragement to those listeners. One, I think try to stand up for yourself and voice in a respectful and empathetic way what you think is best for the team. And if you're in a position to be able to be that bullish where you're like, hey, this just isn't working and here are the following reasons, that definitely speaks volumes to kind of just say, I'm not going to put up with it anymore.
We're in such a sea of change. And that's one of the other things I've realized. We're in such a sea of change. It's all this turmoil, right? You just described a couple tumultuous situations and organizations. Yeah. The ones that get it, the ones that don't. The people we talk about AI. Oh, could I be replaced? I mean, think about it yourself. All of a sudden you're going away and it's like, do they really value me or am I just doing the job and they can, AI, they can efficiency around me, right? There's many women that experience that, unfortunately, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going away on maternity leave. Are they going to figure out over the next 12 to 14 weeks, or even dads on paternity leave, are they going to figure out that they can really probably do without me? That's a real concern for people. And it's a real fear that I think people probably have. Here's one stat that I read this morning that blew me away. There's 75 million baby boomers due to retire between now and 2030. That's at 4.5 million per year. But then I went and Googled it because you can find anything on Google. And there's 4 million people turning 18 every year. So that's a deficit of 500,000. And so it enters into this whole conversation about, am I going to get replaced? How is AI going to replace me? It makes for this weird soup of, if I stand up, am I going to be told, no, sit down, get at the back of the bus? Or am I going to be, oh, wow, we do actually value you. Oh, we have to hear you, because if we don't have someone to turn to.
Yeah. Yep.
Give me your thoughts. Like, again, your feelings, not thoughts as a leader, but feelings as oh, this is Holly. What am I
Yeah.
into?
Well, I mean, my whole thoughts on AI, I'm so grateful for AI. I think it's going to be, it already has been awesome. I think it's going to be awesome. But at the end of the day, I think about the like self-checkout lines at the grocery store or Target, right? Like there still are humans that have to stand there to help us because it doesn't work or there's a human problem that the computer can't fix. And I think that we are a long ways away from completely being, I think people who are concerned about every job's going to be replaced by AI, I don't think that's realistic. I think we're a long ways from that. What I do think AI can help us with is to be able to jumpstart or help us be more efficient to where we as humans can live into the human experience more and in better ways. So for example, with creativity, have you ever been stuck, whether it's writing something or you've got this idea, but like you can't quite verbalize it. And so I think something like ChatGPT can be really helpful to help spur those thoughts that can help us be more creative, to communicate those ideas. And that's the human element that AI will never be able, well, I'm not going to say never because, maybe 10 years from now I'll listen to this and we'll all be laughing because we have like robots doing everything. But that is what, at least right now, I think we should be looking at how can it help us live more fully into the human experience, which is spending less time on tactical admin tasks. Let's let robots do those so that we can coach and guide and mentor our people and our teams. That is an art, not a science. A robot can't do that fully. Yes, it could have prompts and ask questions, but be able to observe body language and understand that full person's story and help them get from here to where they want to be. That's an art that only we as humans can do. And so that's my perspective. For those that would be fearful out there, I just want to encourage you to embrace it, but look at it as how it can help you and your role be able to further the human experience and not replace the human experience.
I think of something so my background is in agriculture, right?
Yeah.
I grew up on a dairy farm. I was a nutritionist for dairy cows. And one of the things that I heard either people around me, even, to an extent, not quite my parents, but, peers of them or friends of mine in college is like, I work with cows so I don't have to work with people. Because and that was true. I mean, you hear a lot of people that are like, oh, I work in such and such an industry, so I don't have to work with people because we thought, oh, that was the solution. And what I'm hearing from you is like, no, we have to, really come to grips with the human touch because that still drives everything, even if we have all the technology and the prompting and the creative juices coming from that technology. If we don't understand that that's only done by a person and it's our job to coach that person, so it creates, I had someone tell me this morning that there are people going to ChatGPT online for therapy. And so much to the fact that you have to be careful there because it may tell you to do things that probably no one should ever hear to do. But that's either a reliance as a generation or to be wary of, oh no, you got to be careful what's being written there because if it's not written from someone that would fly to meet Holly for the meeting, instead saying, I don't care about Holly, come to me, those responses are going to be totally different.
Yeah, I think, and again, like on the one hand, I think it's good, right? It's best if someone is most comfortable going to online and ChatGPT to seek help. I would rather them go there than not anywhere at all.
Yeah,
and so if it's a first step that can help someone get some initial answers and feel like they can not do something harmful, like yes, but hopefully it'll be a step that leads them towards that human connection with someone that can truly dig in and be able to help them and not, to your point, give computerized answers that who knows what they're going to get. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're talking about this and, we see a younger generation and they're so savvy, right? They know how to do things much better than me. And it's like, great, do it. It's okay. there's other things I can figure out how to do. But when I think about this, and part of our, I guess, why I see as the problem we're in is we told people for so long, go work, find all those technical skills and don't worry about the people skills. And technology has almost allowed people to do that. And
Yeah.
yet we're circling back and saying, oh, we made a mistake. We didn't have all the human skills, the people skills to inform the computer stuff. So I guess as you're in development, that's what Leadr's about. How do you help people that maybe don't understand how to develop individuals to then codify it and bring it through their organization that, the most important thing, whatever we do, whatever our widget is to develop people?
Yeah. I always like to start, again, going back to the human connection. A lot of times I'll start with asking, tell me about the most impactful leader that you've ever had in your life. Because we all have those stories of someone who has
Who's
said
yours?
that. Oh, mine, the most, so Dawn Fotopoulos was my college professor who I just wanted to be just like her. I mean, it was like, yes, I wanted to go into business I wanted to go to business already, but she really helped solidify for me, like going into business, specifically marketing. And so she's one of my first, like, I can draw a direct line back to her believing in me and just encouraging me and even giving me career advice. Her advice was one of the reasons I took my first and second job that after college. So very grateful for you, Dawn, if you're listening to this. But we've also probably all had the opposite. And so we actually have an exercise when someone comes onto our team at Leadr. So our co-founders are from New Zealand, and apparently they claim that our version of, like, how in the States we say like negative Nancy, or like, oh, she's just being a Karen, or whatever. I've heard recently the male version of that is Chad. Like, oh, he's just being a Chad. I don't know. But their version of that in New Zealand is Nigel No Mates, which is hilarious. Nigel No Mates.
That's a very Kiwi thing.
Very Kiwi.
Yeah.
But our founders started this tradition where now every new team member, we have to share what's called our Nigel story. And this is the opposite of what I just said. It's the leader who has said something that has been the opposite, that really hurt you or held you back. That if only they had said the opposite, where would you be? And so it really helps every new Leadr team member go back to their why. Why are they writing that line of code? Why are they on Zoom with that prospect? Why are they, building this marketing asset? It's their Nigel story is what we call it. And so I think it's really helpful to start there. Who's that leader that has been the most impactful in your life and has helped you get where you are? And then on the flip side, who's that leader who held you back? And to be connected to our why. So I'm trying to remember what your original question was, Tyler.
It doesn't matter. We went down a path that is so much better. It doesn't, because we talked about Dawn, we talked about how she made you feel. We got to Nigel. This is what I took from that. And you described it. How did you respond? When people cared and saw the bigger picture. Right. There's you can look for information and it says now the workforce today doesn't care as much about money. I think because of it's just different, right? It's available in different ways, but it's more of like, I want to be, looked after. I want to be cared for. I want to feel like my job matters.
Yes.
And, coming back to Holly, I think you shared a story earlier that everyone at Leadr thinks that you matter, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Everyone wants to feel that. And yet the reality is not everyone does.
Yes. The majority, especially at work, the majority of people do not feel like they matter.
Yeah, that's what stats say. The majority don't. And it's just like, okay, that's our problem, right?
It is. We spend more time at work than we do anywhere else, usually even more time than with our families. And for people to feel like they don't matter at work is it's awful. It's terrible. Imagine where we'd be if more people felt engaged and thriving and found dignity in the work they were doing every day.
It's why I look at Leadr, yourself, or people. There can't be too much of us that have the same thought that people need to be cared for. I got there because I screwed it up. You've shared how you you know, you didn't say you screwed it up. You just said you learned. You
Oh,
said,
I've definitely screwed it up before though. I've got plenty of those stories.
well, but here's where I think it's important. You learned from it. You got better. I got better, and I was forced to get better. And I think that's the conversation here is we better learn. Again, I'm using too many words that are similar, but we have to engage in a relationship, a connection, much like what Dawn shared with you, or people are just going like, oh, I can go anywhere. And if we want our organization to grow and develop, we have to say, those people matter. And I need to invest in them, even if they decide they need to go somewhere. Because if I don't invest them and they stay, we're in trouble.
Tyler, you nailed it. That is one of my biggest pet peeves is when I'm talking to a leader and like, let's just say, they're interested in buying our platform and they're like, yeah, but like, they get their paycheck. Like that should be the reward, and it's like, you're telling me that like, first of all, payroll is for the majority of organizations is the largest line item in your budget is payroll. Not to mention all of the things that come with that. Like, oh, by the way, you have an office space because humans have to get together and work, if that's why you've decided to not be remote and have an office, or all of the insurance that you're providing. Like, countless expenses that go into the people that do the work. And so why would we not invest? If you knew that, spending $5 on this could get you X return, why would you not spend it? But people look at payroll line item on the budget as a flat, something to not invest in, but it is the biggest line item in our budget. And so I get really worked up about that because I'm like, when people say, oh, you can't really measure employee development or investing in people, it's like, you're telling me that you want them to come in and stay the same and not drive results for your organization, and you're okay with that. No leader would be okay with that. So you have to make that investment in order to see those results, in your business or your organization.
That reminds me of a story. Guy's name is Chad, quite coincidentally.
Oh, there you go.
It's amazing.
Chad.
Yeah. And, we had a conversation about people he was leading. And, I made the comment about they aren't driven to get better because you haven't shown that you care about them. And he's like, well, that's not my job. He was the leader of the organization. He's like, they should just be driven to show up. And it's like, but it's not. And just this idea of, I even posed it further. It's like, but what if the difference between you having that conversation was the difference between someone feeling cared about or having suicidal thoughts? And it can be that drastic, right? What you just talked about was that drastic. Either they develop me and care about me, or no one cares about me because that's how they feel. Yeah. And it's almost, he was taken aback and he's like, well, I can't even go there. And I'm like, well, you should be, because that's the world we live in. And I think that's what so many leaders have the opportunity to say, hey, I can't take it all on my shoulders as something bad were to happen, but man, I can make sure that I show people they do matter and care. Yeah. And they'll respond, probably blow me away.
Yes. And even to Chad, even if Chad's not willing to open himself up enough to go there or admit that just caring for people enough is being a better person. If you just want to look at the ROI of like, Chad, do you want more for your company? Are you trying to drive better results, whether it's money or whatever goal you're working towards? Like, caring for your people allows them to show up every day caring for their work. But when they don't feel like they're cared for, they're going to put in the minimal effort possible. They're going to check in and check out from 9 to 5 and put more energy into the things where they do matter, whether that's at home or a hobby or a side gig.
Yeah. As you said that, one thing that hit me, and in that organization, what I found is they just didn't work as hard. And his expectation is just work harder, we'll get the results. It's like, but if they don't, and this is where it just hit me from there, is when people start to do that, quiet quitting or whatever else, they don't feel cared about, so they don't put in as much effort. It's a trust issue. And that's what happened in that organization. It was an absolute trust issue. There wasn't much psychological safety. And that's where, we circle all the way back to our first part of it. What what I think is most important in any relationship is the trust. And I have to believe that development is a show sign of trust.
Absolutely.
How do you guys see that play out?
Yeah. I mean, again, trust is the foundation. You cannot develop someone if they don't trust you. I mean, think about a coach. I think about, whether you're like an Olympic coach or any sort of sports athlete coach, even if they're a really hard coach that's demanding, if that athlete doesn't believe that that coach wants the best for them, the coaching and development isn't going to work. It's not going to stick.
Yeah.
So it all goes back to establishing that trust and building from there. Otherwise, you are literally going to get the bare minimum from your people and your team. And I think for people like, people like Chad, his team probably sees him as giving the bare minimum. So they're also going to model the behavior they're going to mirror the behavior that's modeled for them. Yeah. And so, I got the chance to listen. Our CEO interviewed the chief people officer of Southwest Airlines, Elizabeth Bryant. And she said, our philosophy of people development is really simple. We as the leadership team invest in our managers. Our managers invest in their employees. Our employees invest in the customers. The customers are delighted and come back to us, which drives revenue. And it was like, she just said it so simply. And it's like, that's it. Like, that is what drives a business forward. At the end of the day, even if a Chad is just focused on revenue, you cannot argue with the fact that you investing in your leaders investing in their managers investing in frontline employees who are investing in their customers drives revenue. And when you have frontline employees who are giving the amount of care that they are given, then that's on you as the leader. They're either giving above and beyond because they've been cared for and they want to show that to the customers, or they're giving the bare minimum because they've been showed the bare minimum and they literally don't care about the outcome for the customer. So it's up to you as the leader to choose.
So I'd love to hear another Holly story, story from your experience of like, when did you like have a situation where it's like, ooh, they don't trust me, or like, I heard you say you can be intense, right? Enneagram 8, we have that. I'm a hard driver. I'm results-based. When did that cause a trust issue for you? And how did you overcome that?
2022. Yeah, I'm like, what year are we in? 2022. I was crushing it, Tyler. I was the healthiest I'd ever been. I got on this health kick over like a 7-month journey, lost a lot of weight, was really fit, feeling good, was crushing it at work. Like my outcomes on the marketing team were just doing really, really well. And so our CEO came to me and said, and I already had plans to build another team, our account management team, which we were building for the first time, which I'm a builder. I love building new things. And then he came to me and he said, hey, Holly, I also want you to take over the sales team, which for me was like to oversee our entire go-to-market team from marketing to sales to account management was like my dream. Like if you had asked me what my dream job was and I could write it out, like that was it. And so I was like, oh, this is amazing. I have zero idea what I'm doing, but like, let's go. So my downline went from like 5 people to 40 overnight, like not kidding. Like it was like tiny little team to a big team at least for me. So out of my excitement and my intensity, I know I'm an Enneagram 8, I'm an ENTJ, I'm a D on the disc, like all the energy, right? I jumped in and I saw all of these changes that I wanted to make. And so I started from day one. I mean, it was just like, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. Here's why. Let's go. We got this. But what happened was I assumed that I had that team's trust because I worked with them already. Like they knew me. We were on the same, big T team, but they didn't report to me. And so I was like, oh, I don't need to take time to do all these one-on-ones and, listen and repeat back to them what I'm hearing. Like they know me. But that assumption that I had trust was the biggest mistake that I made. So what I wish that I had done was spent those first 30 days just listening. And I know everybody says that, like literally every leadership book, it's like, don't make any changes for the first 30, whatever. But So I learned never assume you have trust, because I got a lot of pushback. I mean, the team dug their heels in, because even if they agreed it was a good change, it was still change, and it was a lot at one time. And so I ended up working with an executive coach and took a test that told me that my constraints, which I really like this perspective, it was that your top constraints are overused strengths. So your top constraints are overused strengths, which I really appreciated that perspective, because it's like my intensity is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a strength. But when it's overused, that is where it's a constraint for me leading effectively. And so what I learned from that was that if I go too fast or I'm too intense, then my team feels like they can't keep up. And that's scary that's scary to anybody, to feel like they can't keep up or they're going to be left behind. And so, so I spent the next 9 months leading that huge team of 40. And number one, I went right back into my same unhealthy habits that I had just proven to myself that I could get out of. I went right back in. I was working 1 million hours a week. I was sending emails at 1 a.m. I was skipping meals. I wasn't exercising. I mean, I just slid right back into my unhealthy habits. I caused a lot of distrust, and my stress to like hit a number, I let really infuse into the rest of the team, which was very difficult for them to feel excited to come to work every day when I'm like, okay, guys, we're behind on our goal. Like, that's not fun for anybody. And so ultimately I ended up giving that team back to our CEO. And it was really hard, super hard. I mean, humbling. It was really hard. But number one, learned a ton as I've just kind of walked through from that. And even about my own identity. I was trying so hard to prove myself that I lost sight of my why. So like my personal mission statement is to help people achieve their full potential and achieve more than they ever thought they could. Like that's my little personal mission statement. And rather than coming to work with that team with that in mind every day, I had a number in mind. And so if I could go back, I would do that so differently. And that was a time where I let my intensity take root a bit too much, to where it really held me back and was a constraint rather than a strength. And it wasn't until I was pretty angry for those first few months after giving the team back to our CEO. And then I had a perspective shift in, I guess it was May of last year, where through the help of a mentor who said, what if you stopped looking at everything as success versus failure or black and white, and you just started looking at everything as an experiment and what you can learn from it? And so adopting that mindset in my personal life and also in my professional life, I started our partnership with the Table Group. Patrick Lencioni's team happened about a month after that. We got pregnant 2 months after that. And I'm not saying it's not like magic or, secret sauce, but I do think that me unattaching myself from a result really helped me do my best work, and in every area of life, be a better wife and partner and leader and marketing leader and all of those things, rather than being so addicted to trying to prove myself in a certain way. So you asked for a Holly story. That was a long one.
That's great. No, it is. But here's the thing is you don't necessarily know this, but I can relate to that tremendously.
Yeah.
Like so much. I mean, that's honestly why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I know there's also many, 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 many people listening and watching this that have been through those. And maybe they didn't, the failure of the CEO taking it away. Oh, what did that do to them? Did they end up leaving because, the shame or whatever else? You just told me that you grew and you learned and you got better through it, which takes a very insightful, person. And, I think that's awesome. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I know it's going to help others.
Thanks.
On that, one final question. How do you take that and then this upcoming period of now, maternity leave to motherhood, to how do you take what you just learned and that experience and propel it forward into a world unknown?
Tyler, I'm so glad you asked me this. I was literally working on like documenting my maternity leave right before we started this podcast. So I'm so grateful you asked me. What a great question. Because the number one thing is I have got to let go of the outcomes and trust my team. And that's, I think, for a lot of us who are control freaks, some of it has helped us get to where we are in life. First of all, it's on me to help create a really awesome plan to set my team up for success. And then to trust my team that they are so capable and way smarter than me, and, to go execute on that so that they don't feel paralyzed by my disappointment if they don't hit a goal, or, that they have to prove themselves while I'm gone, but that they can truly be their best selves and be excellent in their role. That's what matters. And so it's a good reminder for me to even share this so I can listen to this 3 months from now. But yeah, that's what I want to take. I want to take into my maternity leave being gone. So I'll be gone for 3 months. And so, I want my team to be able to feel like I trust them. They got this. They don't need me. That we have a great plan. And when we show up every day as our best selves and have clear direction, then the results will follow. And rather than me being so focused on a number or trying to prove something while I'm away.
I appreciate you sharing. And you're obviously in the midst of it, right? And it'll play out how it plays out.
Exactly.
Where can people learn more about you and your work, Holly?
Yeah. So my personal website is hollytate.com. I don't update it as much as I would like to, but it is there. You can read about my bio and see some outdated photos. But this will be good when the baby comes. Maybe we can have some updated photos. That'll be fun. And then Leadr we spell it funny, Leadr. So Leadr.com is also where you can go. We've got tons of content and resources, from webinars to we're about to launch a podcast soon. So inspired by you, Tyler. About to launch a podcast soon. So you can find that there. So that's where I spend the majority of my time is more on Leadr, Leadr.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. Remember to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts, rate and review each episode. That way, people can find more impactful leaders just like Holly. Thank you for being here. And until next time, choose to lead with impact.